Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies is qualified because we already have two, but I was looking around. I'm sure there'll be more. Anyhow, to yet another event of our Ambassadors Lecture Series. This one, with a slight difference, as I was explaining to Ambassador Gurjit Singh, we normally have ambassadors accredited to Singapore. But we have had in the past retired ambassadors who are initiated into the academic world, just initiated, or to other kinds of public service, come and speak as well. Not necessarily having to do with Singapore. We had Prince Zayed Riyadh of Jordan, who later went on to become UN High Commissioner for Refugees. We had Ambassador Shafkat Kaka Khail from Pakistan, who went on to become Deputy Director General, I think it's called, of UNEP. We had George Moose, US Ambassador, who went on to become Vice Chair of the United Nations Institute of Peace. So, Ambassador Gurjit Singh, welcome to ISAS. I see that you have had a very distinguished career, 37 years in the Indian Foreign Service. His bio is, by the way, all before you, but he's a diplomat with a difference in the sense that he's got many contributions in the way of books. So he has had his intellect work with him throughout his desk work in the various places that he has served in, missions that he has served in, Japan, for instance, or almost everywhere he has gone, he has come out with a book. He's retired from the Foreign Service 2 months ago. And as by this time you would all be aware that ambassadors like generals never retire. They just fade away, but we hope that Ambassador Singh will not fade away and will have another avatar in the academia, which I believe is a choice of his. We're going to speak to a very important subject today, India and Europe. It comes at a very apt time, opportune time. Almost this event is going to be a curtain raiser as far as ISAS is concerned to Prime Minister Modi's visit to Germany. He's, as you know, right now in Germany, and he'll go on to Spain afterwards. He's had some fruitful discussions with Chancellor Angela Merkel, but we'll speak about these eventually. The title today is Europe and India. Europe, for those of us in South Asia, Europe has always been of great interest for practical and theoretical terms. I'm not speaking of the contacts that date back, in the case of India and Germany, to the Sanskrit Germanic connections, but also Europe, Alexander, etc., historically, intellectually thereafter. But more importantly, in modern times, the theoretical contribution of Europe to South Asia has been very great, and I'm going to tell you why. You see, immediately after the war, when Europe, which had founded the Westphalian system, 1648, came out of it, and the theoretical concept of functionalism began to take root. The sort of intellectual proponents of this movement, as you perhaps know, were people like David Mitrani and Ernst Haas, who was an American, by the way. And it was put to fruition by Jean Monnet. The whole idea was you build linkages across a very broad spectrum of activities so that the conflictual relationship at more central levels is diffused. Now, this is very important because, in other words, you have all these functional areas, economic areas, commercial areas. You work together on these, and then the higher issues of politics, Hochpolitik, etc., eventually become reduced in terms of a focal point or source of tensions. Now, functionalism, some of you may be aware, was at the root of the concept of SARC. When we thought up SARC in the late 80s, we were deeply, deeply influenced by the developments in Europe. Some will argue, as my own mentor Hedley Bull had, that the state system has come to stay. So eventually the central point of the organization of a global system would be still the states in the near future. And that is probably being proved right even in Europe itself. Back to India's relations with Europe. I don't want to steal the ambassador's thunder. He's going to speak about it. But as I said, right now, Prime Minister Modi is visiting Russia. Ambassador has had very varied experiences in Africa, in Indonesia, and also in Germany. So he, I'm sure, will bring to bear in his talk his other experiences and will form some kind of a mental synthesis in the way you explain Germany-Indian relations. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chowdhury. A great honor to be here among such a distinguished audience in this distinguished place. You said many things which a retired ambassador does. This retired ambassador has been visiting places to open his mind further. I was at Facebook the other day, I was at Google, I was at the Salk Institute to do things I had never done in my career. And here I am perhaps on more familiar ground, but again doing something I have never done before, which is speak without responsibility. But perhaps I can speak a little freer. Yes, the timing is perfect. Prime Minister Modi is in Germany for the Indo-German governmental consultation, it's a real unique format where you have about half a dozen ministers on each side joining the Chancellor and the Prime Minister and having a discussion. It's like a very giant joint commission which has a lot of preparatory work into it. Then he's going to go to Spain, he's going to go to Russia, still European, and then goes to France to meet Mr. Macron rather early. That is Prime Minister Modi. Grasp an opportunity, never let go of even a day which is free. And I think most bureaucrats who work with him suffer from this, that we never get a free moment. There's no time to hang around there. You finish and you get onto the plane and go to the next destination. So when I left Germany, I had a 3-day program for the Prime Minister. It's come down to precisely less than 2 days. But they do everything which is important. And I think at this moment, going to Europe was very important because of the way Europe is sort of becoming like a new Rubik's Cube with all the colors messed up. So what is Europe? Europe, if you look at the Council of Europe, it's over 48 or 49 countries. But the European Union has 28 minus 1. Out of the 28, I think 21 are in Schengen, 21 are in NATO, 19 are in the Eurozone. So what you have is a differentiated Europe. So all this talk that today can we have a 2-tier or 3-tier Europe, I have never really understood it because Europe is also multi-tiered already. There is, as I said, 21 in Schengen, 19 in Schengen, 19 in Eurozone, 21 in Schengen, 21 in NATO. And then there is the Council of Europe, which is 49. Will the EU, which is 27, 28, ever get there? We don't know. So the questions are all in Europe. And what the EU after the fall of the Berlin Wall was meant to be was an outreach where the state system was to take a back seat, nationalism was to come down, and we were to go to greater connectivity, greater trade relations, greater free movement of peoples. And this is how the old Warsaw Pact was more or less subsumed within the EU. Was this successful is something which is not clear. But certainly in the tiers that Europe had, the bringing in the former Soviet allies created a new tier, what today they like to call New Europe. But the New Europe also feels, where are we really going? So this question, where are we going, I think permeates every European country today, whether they are in the 1 tier, 2 tier, 3 tier, 4 tier. So I don't think Schengen is really being called into question, except when it comes to refugees. I don't think NATO is being called into question by the Europeans. It is being called into question by the Americans. So when you look at, say, common defense and foreign policy, to the Europeans, common defense policy means NATO. It doesn't really mean a European army. And when it means common foreign policy, I don't think they seriously talk about it, because it will ultimately mean, how do you bring Germany into the Security Council? What do you do with the our 2 old Security Council members? So that question, I think Europe doesn't really tangle with. And when it comes to the High Representative, I think they have certain amount of issues which I personally believe they should stick to peacekeeping and crisis management to a greater extent. From India's point of view, this Europe is not playing its role that we think it should, because India views itself today as a net provider of stability and growth, and therefore we should be a momentum provider to the world economy. We believe that the biggest problems that we and the world faces are terrorism, climate change, all these health-related epidemics and related issues, and then of course there is the issue of free trade and investment, including free movement of people. And linked to all this is the other non-traditional challenges like cyber, money laundering, refugees, illegal movement of peoples, all of which militate against stability. Now, when you look at Europe today, we believe that while India, the biggest democracy, and Europe, the most vocal democrats, talk big about democracy, we don't do enough. And my recent book on India and Germany, Opportunity Beckons, the opening chapters are actually on this issue of democracy. That Germans love to pat India on the back and say, what a great democracy you are. And we in turn have added this line, what a great democracy Germany has become. Fact, right? They have become since 1945. But this mutual patting on the back is not leading to any concrete effort to support democratic values anywhere. But how do we work on them? And then you come to these issues of terrorism, cyber, money laundering, equal rights for refugees or migrants, opportunities for people in trade. So this democratic angle is spoken of but not acted on. So this is something that we believe India and Europe need to do more. And this is not that we should lecture others more on how their democracy or their human rights should function, but literally look within us and see how we can inculcate these values both within our countries, regionally, internationally. Second part is, do we do enough on terrorism? Certainly, we don't believe that Europe takes terrorism seriously. They have had a series of mishaps in the last few years, most regrettably in England, just in Manchester the other day. But Germany had one over Christmas. But there's so many now. But there is still this debate between how much to watch out for and how much to bear. And this is not really clear, and we don't believe they do enough in information sharing, information collection, and they sneer at the Americans, but the Americans are actually who get them out of the pickle in most cases. Then when it comes to issues like cybercrime, this is now hurting them a lot, particularly since the Germans believe that Russian hackers are trying to influence their political narrative. So therefore, cyber has become huge in Germany, and there's a huge amount of investment being made in it. India supports that, but does it have to be confined to national borders? Or is it the issue is much bigger? And then you go forward, let us take to trade and investment. India's trade with Europe was about 80 billion in the 2011, and 2016 come down to 77 billion. And India's trade with our biggest trading partner, which is Germany, is about 17.5 billion, which is quite substantial considering the total trade is 77. But their investment in India is not large. The total EU investment in India is 0.7% of total EU overseas investment. In Singapore, it is about 2.2%. So this is really small. Now, the lead Europeans like France and Germany really believe that India gives much more to Japan, for instance, than access to its economy. But we often point out to them that you don't do nothing which Japan does. With Japan, we have a trade agreement, but our trade is less than our trade with Germany with no trade agreement. So that shows what aggressive traders they are. And when it comes to ODA and investment, Japan is 3 times as big as Germany in India. So there's no way that the Germans or anybody else is going to catch up with Japan. Now, what are we contending with, therefore? We are contending with resurgent nationalism in Europe. We are contending with a challenge to democracy, which comes not through coup, revolution, or mutiny. It comes from democratic decisions like referenda or elections. So I think the French election has sort of got them a sigh of relief, and Mrs. Merkel's recent successes in some state elections, 2 of which were held by the opposition SPD, has put some spring back in her step. So what her party will not try to do, and I think they need a very good PR agency, is how to get a 10 to 12-year-old regime look fresh. So that painting needs to be done, otherwise they are not really going to get very far. Much like Macron has done. But Macron and Merkel are very different. Merkel comes from a traditional party and has ruled for so long. Macron is that fresh face which Europe was looking for. How much does Europe believe in all this? So I was always reminded when I was in Germany that when you go to the factors which impede our perception of India in Germany, for instance, and I think also Europe, are 2. One is what you mentioned, the great study of Indology. So there was a guy called Max Muller, who every Goethe Institute in India is called the Max Muller Bhavan. And the guy knew so much about India in those days, which nobody else knew. The problem with Max Muller was never went to India. And that's the problem with most German and Europeans. They still don't go to India. And they think they know everything about India and Asia. So that is one big impediment, the lack of engagement, frequent engagement. If it has changed at the governmental level. You see many more prime ministers and heads of state and ministers coming, but the flow of tourists, of businessmen, of students, of academics is still very low. And without that civil society engagement, you're not really going to get a move on. The second, what I call is the Beethoven factor. In the walls of the Beethoven house, there are originals handwritten by Beethoven. And one of them, which is not exhibited, but was shown to me because he used the word India, is that he tells his publisher, I want my works known everywhere. Calcutta, Pondicherry, North America, Greenland, in that order. So the guy knew about India. He knew about Pondicherry. And he wanted his works sold there. Good European German attitude. Let me sell to India. And that's where it stops. What do you buy from India? That part is still weak. What do you invest for what we call reverse integration? That is still weak. So we see a messy Europe, which we would like to see having far greater clarity than it has. We feel today the European ideals are being implemented with a certain amount of tiredness. And there is a certain amount of revitalization of the European body politic which is required. The departure of Britain, the elections in some states, the political suicide by the Italian Prime Minister at this time, the previous Italian Prime Minister. I mean, all this was not required. I mean, you could have run your project much better. So the lesson that I derive from it is this, that we are not listening to our people enough. If we listen to those people, we perhaps won't have these results. Or if we thought we understood them, we wouldn't have taken those decisions to go for referenda or elections on particular ideas. How are we going to deal with this today? I think Chancellor Merkel is giving you an example of somebody who was back to the wall, had a very strong challenger coming with a European background, but she is today seen as the real person to beat because she is trying to overcome the tired look that I mentioned and give it a reinvigorated approach. It is significant that the Franco-German coalition broke down in the period of President Hollande. And this was also a step back from a proper implementation of the European project. Traditionally, on foreign and defense matters, Europe, France, and Britain did many things together. And on economic matters, Germany, France, and Britain. Germany and France did things together. But during the Hollande period, the Germans thought that they were not economically liberal enough. They were too command economy oriented, and this helped them win certain defense contracts for submarines and planes in Asia, but was not good domestic policy, and therefore there were differences. But now I see that with Mr. Macron winning, he dashes the next day to Germany. And they come up with an idea that there must be a common basis to talk to Europe and take it forward. I think this is a good step. Secondly, I think Chancellor Merkel, as an unwritten leader of Europe, reluctant leader of Europe, still takes all her European countries' partners very seriously and has extensive consultations with them. So Germany is not trying to become the leader just by say, they're actually trying to present ideas and talk to all the countries who had in any case come together in the Treaty, I think, of Rome 60 years ago as equals. And I think that is something that Germany and France really try and maintain now. Brexit, I think this everybody talks about. I think this is another case of cutting your nose to spite your face in Europe. And a lot of Germans are very riled by it. And they always had the British on their side to take on many other Europeans, and now they feel that arm has been cut off. And they also feel that the British have not really played their cards well since the decision, and there's too much of may and maybe in this whole decision making, and they need Germans like much more stability of policy. Now, I personally believe that the British approach, that while we negotiate an exit, we should also negotiate a trade relationship, is not a bad one. But I think Europe has decided this is not it. You want it out, you get out. And once you are out, we will talk about rest. I think somewhere down the line, some adjustment of this is bound to come. For India, this is the bigger impediment because this puts our India-EU FTA on a further back burner than it already is. India-EU FTA has almost been 10 years in negotiation. It's not going anywhere. And I don't see it going anywhere because the interests are too contradictory. I think Europe just wants, taken in by narrow interests, on pharmaceutical, on wines, on small motor cars, whereas India has got issues like IPR-related issues, it's got issues of free movement of peoples, and of course, better access for our pharmaceuticals and other matters. I think the IT problem has more or less been solved by Indian companies investing in Europe and therefore not suffering the data protection inhibition anymore. But I don't see, despite the Indian government's recent efforts to hasten that process, because everybody tells them, can we do this faster? Can we do this faster? And we find that Europe's response is not forthcoming. It had different reasons for some time, but I believe now it is purely trade reasons and the things are not moving. Added to this is the other dimension that India has decided to abrogate all the bilateral investment protection agreements, which we believe were not in our interest. So whichever agreement's time was running out, we have given notice that these will be terminated. So I think the one with the Netherlands was terminated last year. One with Germany, I think, will go later this year or 2018, and with many other countries. But this is all over the world we have done that, not only with Europe. The problem which comes up in Europe now is that they say, oh, how can we invest, because now we cannot give these Hermes guarantees because you don't give us protection. So, for instance, Germany, we said we're ready to talk to you, but now you can't talk to me. Now you must talk to Brussels. Now, this is something no Indian wants to hear in any European capital, because we believe we can do better with European countries by themselves than with the European Union. And when each time you're told, oh, for this trade issue, go to Brussels, this, go to Brussels, then you are in this big matrix, which today is getting more focused on Brexit than on relationship with us, because the negotiators' teams are broadly the same. So we are not making headway, and I think things have gone worse in the last few years than better. And we really have to find a political way out of this, which I think cannot be found in Brussels. It has to be found by the countries who have the biggest engagement with India. Finally, what are India looking to? Certainly, as I said, stability and growth, but in our growth and all the lead projects that the Modi government has said, countries like Germany, to an extent Spain, France, are lead players. Smart cities, Make in India, defense, Make in India, and many other things like that. They are doing big things. I think the Spanish are involved in smart cities, the Germans are involved, the French are involved. Many countries, even countries like Belgium, Netherlands, are playing major roles. You name it and they are there. Renewable energy is one of the biggest areas of engagement for us. And I think the Germans are coming in a big way, and so are other countries. And this is extremely important to India, because our climate change INDCs are heavily dependent on this support to expansion of renewable energy, particularly solar energy. Because if that doesn't expand, our ability to reduce coal is not going to be fulfilled. So therefore, these go hand in hand. Surprisingly today, it is not India and China which are seen as the bottlenecks to the Paris Accord. It is the United States, much like democracy and much like values and much like many other things. So, as they say, the world today looks different than it did in January. And I think in 2 months later, it will look even more different. So I presume when the diplomat was told, may you live in interesting times, what was meant was, may your times be unpredictable. Because a diplomat loves predictability. When you have a visit, you want everything taped up. You don't want a surprise coming up. So diplomacy and predictability go hand in hand. But the challenge to diplomacy really comes from uncharted territory. And I believe India and Europe are really uncharted territory for the future. Because if we can do things right, there's much more can we do. Can Europe look more at us politically? One example, OBOR. I think the way India looks at OBOR and the way, let's say, even Germany looks at OBOR are totally different. They see it as an economic opportunity. We see it as a strategic problem. So there is a difference. So when the Germans say, we are your strategic partners, we often ask them, what do you mean? Where is the strategic part of this partnership? It can't be renewable energy. It has to be something more strategic, which is terrorism, cybersecurity, and dealing with potential threats. To countries in Asia and India, for instance, South China Sea is an issue. To Europe is not much of an issue. There is a train which now starts in China, Zebu, I think, and comes all the way into Spain, showing that how much we can sell, and goes back nearly empty with olive oil or a few spare parts. So this is OBOR, because they see it. So when I spoke to Deutsche Bahn, I said, why did you invest in this? And then they very quietly said, we never invested in this. For us, we operate it and make money. It's a management fee that we get. Okay, a trading approach, which I mentioned, the Beethoven approach, this is a problem. So there is a strategic mismatch. For the European, for the Germans, for instance, Ukraine is a big problem, and so is for the French. For India, it's a little remote issue. And at the end, what I would like to say is what I saw in Europe was anxiety. Where are we going? And anxiety comes from, have we given up too much of our nationalism on refugees, on this and that, and can we reduce it? Whereas I think in Asia, we never gave up our nationalism, even within ASEAN. We are going more steadily forward. And I think here, the problem is that we all want to assert our nationalism, but it is not as much of a problem as asserting it in Europe is, because the starting point of that is different. And I think in Asia, we are far more optimistic of the future than Europe today looks. And today, just after Mr. Trump's visit, and I don't think the visit was that bad to NATO, to EU, and to the G7. I mean, he said what was expected. We already knew he's going to say all this. He's been talking about it. So, but I think the timing of Prime Minister Modi's visit yesterday and today, and the Chinese president's visit later this week to Germany, is perhaps making a story by directly positing these two, which I think is a false ceiling. I don't think. Yes, but I don't think it is really happening, because I still believe how to handle the United States and Brexit is the top priority in Germany and Europe. Whereas, therefore, Asia is still a good trading opportunity. Yes, we must do more. But when, how, what is still out. So the biggest challenge for an Indian diplomat in Germany and Europe is always how to get some space for yourself out of them when they are so busy doing what they think is important. And that perception issue, the space issue, and then trying to get them to focus is very important. I had lots of consultations with my ASEAN colleagues, my South Asian colleagues in Germany, and I think we all had this common understanding. So thank you very much. I would like to take this occasion to present my book on India and Germany to the Institute. Sir.
We'll have some little token exchange of presentations
Sure,
at the end of the event, but thank you very much for this. And more importantly, of course, thank you very much for those remarks, introduction to our discussions, which I hope will be as stimulating as the remarks have been. It's very interesting that what you speak about, Ambassador. You speak from your experience in the field. I mean, you know, you have been out there, you have done that, all that, and you come, you knit it in a sort of a framework in which it can be. Other experiences can be extrapolated from it. For instance, you talk about India and Europe, but I can see that many of our experiences, as the experiences of other Southeast Asian countries, are very similar to the challenges that India would face in dealing with the European Union. Chris Srinivasan and I and some others have written a book, I mean, we've co-edited a book called Europe in Emerging Asia. And many of the problems that you refer to find mentioned in this book, it's always a problem to identify the Europe you're dealing with, whether you're dealing with the European Commission, and if you are negotiating trade agreement, and if you are negotiating norms, global norms and standards, you have to deal with the single entity of the European Commission, which speaks with 28, 29 voices, but speaks as one voice, and it becomes extremely difficult, not just agriculture, which of course is very difficult, but almost everything else. Okay, I will now open the floor to discussions, and very appropriately, I think, Professor Subrata Kumar Mitra, who's been raring to go, I believe, the last couple of minutes, tremendous expertise in Europe. So I will recognize him first, thereafter Nasrullah, Ambassador.
Yes.
Okay, High Commissioner Nasrullah, and then Anish, and then Surya, but we will go two first, and then Anish and Surya later. Okay.
Excellency, thank you very much for being with us. I have narrowly missed serving with you because I left Heidelberg, where I was a professor for 20 years. I served with other ambassadors, but not with you. I left in 2014. I'm so glad that you said right at the outset that you feel free in our company. That's exactly what we want for the ambassador series. because we know that ambassadors are honest men sent abroad to lie for their countries, but not here. Because we are not a state. We make no decisions except to implement our little budget. But we are a think tank, and we can't think if we don't understand. In that spirit, we have here a body which operates very rigorously Chatham House rules. And I am going to set an example by asking you some questions which would be normally construed as politically incorrect. So there are 3 related questions. I'll be brief. First, 37 years representing India could not have been easy because India's foreign policy is marked by a deep sense of ambiguity. I mean, simple questions like why does a country which refuses to sign the NPT still have the bomb and still wants to get into the NSG? A democratic country which is in Kashmir, and many Kashmiris are not very sure that it's a democratic thing to do, and a country which is a proud democracy presided over by a prime minister who represents an ideology which is, howsoever understood, an exclusive ideology which wants to ban beef, which is recognizable in Europe as a prime food. Now, these are things that make India a deeply ambiguous country. I have written about it. Now, defending this could not have been easy. So the first question is, do you find it easier for Europeans to understand India than Americans or Southeast Asians? I would like you to share, because I have never had a chance to ask this question to an Indian ambassador. First. Second, how about Europeans? Do they have a cohesive policy towards India, or do European states take their own national interests as the marker of their policies towards India? For example, towards India's membership of the NSG or India's position in Kashmir. Is there one European policy, or is it marked by the same kind of discord that you would expect among Europeans for their own purposes? My third question is Germany. During the early year, Germany, West Germany, slavishly followed the American line on Kashmir, always siding with America, and the Soviets had to bail India out through the veto. Did that change? Has Germany developed an independent foreign policy towards India, understanding India as we Indians understand ourselves? Thank you.
Want me to answer now?
Okay. Would you like to go now? Since there are a set of
many
3 questions,
yes.
maybe you
Okay.
start with responding to him, then we'll give the floor to
Thank you, Professor Sobra. I'm really sorry I missed you in Heidelberg, but I had a similar session there, and it was very invigorating indeed.
If
So
you have
thank
more questions like that, you won't be so sorry.
Well, let me answer the last one first. Does Germany have an independent policy towards India? Yes. Including on what you think is the question of Kashmir, which was frankly of no relevance in my time. I never had to go even once to talk about it. My not difficult. Okay, let me step. I come from a university called the Jawaharlal Nehru University. I was a trained public speaker, right? So when it came, and my biggest challenges in Germany were when parliamentary committees would summon you to discuss persecution of Christians or banning of NGOs. Both of which sort of took me by, so I said, give me a few days, let me prepare, let me read something at least. And then I would take my ministry's permission, who initially refused it to all ambassadors. And I said, no, I want to go and talk to these guys. And I would go and talk to them and have a real slaughterhouse. And you know who came out the winner. So, because no guy with English as a second language can beat an Indian with English as his first. So we could get away with jabbering away. But I think it was simply a lack of information, and information being fed by interested parties. So today our challenge is that the media has become bigger, and traditional media is only looking at some story which is not good for us. It's all countries, not only in Germany. We have to use social and other media to get your story across. And that is why Facebook, I think I was one of the first Indian ambassadors to actually use YouTube to put out a story when I was in Indonesia, the day I took over as presented my credentials. So we have used, I have used social media And when I went to Facebook now, this is what I was saying, how do I use that to socially relevant? So yes, so Germany has a thing, but there are problems. And if I think back of my days in Japan, the biggest problem used to be environment, the Narmada project. I hardly ever had to go and discuss Kashmir. So those were the issues you really had to work on. What are we doing? How are we going green? And I think those are very important. And there I think that the current government's continuing policy towards having very responsible INDCs towards Paris climate change has taken the sting out of us, and we are no more the bad guys. And this way I think we have done many things. Coming to your second question, does Europe have a cohesive policy? I think, to be honest, something which concerns European countries, then they will not listen to Brussels. They will take their own position for domestic reasons vis-a-vis India or anybody else for that matter. I remember when India had the atomic explosion in '98, there was many European countries went ahead and imposed sanctions on us. And when the size of the Indian market hit them a little harder, hit their business a little harder, who found everything was shut, then the same people who imposed them were coming and knocking on your doors with business delegations. So I think it's a matter of economics rather than politics. But on certain issues, some of which you mentioned, where I think each European country today does not see the merit of taking it up in India bilaterally, they send it to Brussels. And then Brussels will keep talking about it. But as you know, Brussels talks about trade. Nothing gets done really. So while we are unhappy with trade being in Brussels, we much rather it was done by the countries. Certain issues, some of which you mentioned, are in Brussels. I'm quite happy about it. Representing India. When I joined the Foreign Service in 1980, Mrs. Gandhi had just come back to power. And by the time I was leaving Japan at the end of my first posting, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi was there. And I was there for his first visit to Japan. And I remember seeing it as a change of perception. The old India had gone and the new India was walking here in front of you. That was the perception in Japan at that time, and I think in much of the world. Subsequently, I was in Japan again when Mr. Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister and Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Finance Minister. I have handled their visits to Japan, and there I have seen this the economic engagement come to life. In between, there were periods when we had to deal. For instance, I was in Japan when Mr. Gandhi was assassinated and there was a massacre of the Sikhs in Delhi. And as a Sikh press officer of the embassy, I had a task, which I hope I did to the best of my ability, both individually and as a member of the service. Similarly, when Mr. Modi took over, I think there was a huge feeling as you articulated. But in foreign policy, if I can say something, is that he has given India a renewed stature, which somehow in the last years of the UPA, we were looking a bit diffident, right? But he has given you this stature which says we are on the move. And that big Make in India, which was done in Germany in 2015, has really energized them. And they feel that we can do something. But of course, Germans, like most Europeans, have many excuses why we don't do things. So what I learned was that try and not get left in the macro, big picture. Go into the micro. Deal with one company, one newspaper, one academic, one parliamentarian if necessary. Persuade him. That has domino effects. That was the lesson I learned in my time. Thank you.
Okay, good start to the discussions. I will recognize High Commissioner Nasrullah Khan of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. Yates. It was really refreshing.
The microphone, Nasrullah.
Yeah, it was a very, very refreshing and incisive talk. My observation is just academic, it's not about India-EU relations. I think at the outset of your conversation, you talked about the common defense policy, and then you observed that it was all about defense within the context of NATO. I think Europe does have a rudimentary common defense policy. The Americans and the strategic thinkers of the US, they also think that it's like, tantamounts to undermining the NATO in the overall European sense. So this was my observation. I mean, what do you think about it? Or maybe I didn't grasp what you said. But they have a common defense policy. We have the ambassador of Belgium sitting here in the audience. I think he would also bear me out, that Europe does have a common defense policy, and they want now to raise some permanent course also. I have served in Brussels, and at that time, there used to be a lot of talk about it. So you are more current, from that part of the world. So maybe the situation has changed. Thank you.
Before you respond, Ambassador, would you like to come in on this, on the common defense policy, European?
Well, I'm not really an expert on defense issues, but of course we have a common foreign and defense policy. Let me just, on the foreign policy, maybe quote a former French foreign minister who said on European foreign policy, having a common policy does not mean you have one unique single policy. So on several important issues we do have a common position, but that does not mean we have to have it on all issues. So there is sometimes a misunderstanding of European foreign policy that we are one single body that has a single position on all issues, and whenever we don't have one, that's a failure. Let me just correct that perception.
So the policy could lead to different postures vis-à-vis individual issues.
Yes,
Is that what
you
you're
can
saying?
have.
Yeah.
On trade, of course, we have a common policy, one policy, and there is.
The point
We
is,
refer to Brussels.
would that posture be an interpretation of that policy, or would that posture be a policy individually of individual European component countries? I think that is an automatic question that will come out of what you've just said.
We try to have a common position on important issues, which we all respect. That can have subtle differences in how we deal with that. But if you look at, for instance, important issues such as Middle East, on Ukraine, you will have a common position where there is not that much difference in how we approach these issues. So it all depends on how we deal with Chile, Argentina. There's no need to have a very developed common position. There will be, of course, bilateral relations that remain bilateral.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I think you heard me correct. What I said was that Europe has a common defense and foreign policy. My assessment is that common defense policy, be as it may, the dependence is largely of a defense within NATO. And where common foreign policy is concerned, from Indian point of view, the major issue would be how would they reform the Security Council, where Germany is our partner in G4, but I don't think Germany talks of this within the context of a common foreign policy of Europe, because then the question would come, what do you do with the old two people? So I think there is, as he said, there is a policy, but its implementation, its nuances all vary. The reality is that every country does what it thinks feel best it can in the context it can. For instance, when the countries of Europe were asked to join the coalition of the willing in Iraq, Germany didn't go. But when the Europeans led the assault on Libya, and I would call it the ill-advised assault on Libya, and now on Syria, I think the Americans sort of followed them rather than led them. And somewhere down in history, when these are assessed, I think Europe will have to answer for a lot on both Syria and Libya, because I don't think, even forget the ideology, from the implementation point of view, what it led to was not something which the world, we could have lived without it. I mean, let's put it this way. But at the same time, what they are doing in Mali, I think is more constructive than destructive, because they are trying to deal with the situation, and there the Germans are leading. The German brigade today is having common people from, I think, Slovakia, from, I think, Poland is it, and 3 countries are sending brigades to join a common German division for common training. And German troops have now finally gone to the Baltics to bolster their defense. Now, these are not NATO-led things. They are things happening in Europe, no doubt. But Europe doesn't produce single tank. They produce many tanks. So you have a multiplicity of small numbers of things. And this makes an impact. For instance, when they supported the African Union in the Darfur operation, it was a mess. Because operationally, they had Canadian radio sets, they had Dutch APCs, they had German tanks, and all of them were not integrated. Now, this is what led you to believe that European defense was not integrated. So I think if you have a common defense policy is one thing, but to have an integrated defense is a totally different thing. And that, I think, is not happening in Europe. And I think, therefore, one of the reasons why the Darfur mission, the AMIS, had to become a UNMIS is because there was a lack of integration of European equipment. And I think this is also true in the operations in Libya, when I believe that there was inadequate supply of air tankers, refuelers. So ultimately the Americans had to be called in to keep supporting them. So I think in future the Americans will be more wary of supporting some European ventures in the other parts of the world, because I don't think these are clearly thought out. This is also because each European country would like to play a role, but then would like to take everybody along. And when you do this, you get a mishmash, you don't get clear policy. I think that is where you have this integrated defense policy and operation is something which is, well, if you'd like to call it work in progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to flag the point that so far what hasn't come up in our conversation is aspects of Europe's role in Asia and subcontinent, which is soft power areas, issues, soft power, support in terms of holding elections, etc. Other general issues like human rights and all that, when Europe claims that it is strong and perhaps does have a role, in Europe's role in development cooperation, the role of the Uchstein sisters, EBA, everything but arms, market access to the sort of the poorest or most underprivileged Asian countries. Of course, this does not form very much a part of India's relations with European Union, which is the central focus on our subject. But if we are discussing Europe and Europe's relationship with the countries in Asia, I think these elements should also somehow find a focus. Anish, you introduced yourselves from henceforth. And
yes, my name is Anish Mishra. Okay, firstly, I'd like to thank the ambassador for the very excellent presentation. Before asking you this question, I've actually asked myself this question many times and I could not get the answer, which is why I'd like to exercise the privilege of your presence to ask you this question. So my question is actually related to the GSP Plus, which I'm quite surprised why it has not been mentioned until now. Okay, with Brexit, the GSP Plus has to be renegotiated. Okay, I look at Pakistan within Pakistan for Pakistan, right? Almost one quarter of their exports goes to Europe, and they get 78% subsidy on this. And I guess countries like India and Bangladesh and our other South Asian countries do exercise actually very similar privileges on this. And I think nobody here can say that we do not need that preferential market access to Europe. So with Brexit, this has to be, redone with the United Kingdom. Now the thing is that I've actually predicted this, that UK will actually not offer our South Asian countries the GSP Plus, and they will want to have a free trade agreement with our countries instead. And I've been proven right, because recently actually Boris Johnson, he went to a Gurdwara in UK and actually spoke about getting getting tariff-free Scotch in India and Scotch whiskey in India. Of course, insensitive to the religious sentiments. Now the thing here is that I want to know from you is that, do you think our countries would actually be able to resist FTA from the United Kingdom. And if you look at GSP Plus actually gives the European Union some power over the South Asian countries, as Dr. Chowdhury mentioned just now about the human rights issues. Where Pakistan is concerned, the EU has actually made Pakistan sign 27 agreements on human rights, labor law, environmental law, and GSP Plus is actually one way where the European Union actually exercise some power on our countries. So the question for you here is FTA or another kind of GSP Plus with United Kingdom for our countries? And a sub-question to this is that with Brexit, right, because UK were our former colonial masters, they know the South Asian countries best. So with Brexit, where do you think will be the new South Asia's new gateways to Europe? Thank you.
Okay, maybe we take another question. Now we can take 2 by 2. And next on the list was Mr. Surya Narayana. Will you?
Hello. I'm Surya from ISAS. I'll confine myself to the flavor of the season, that is China's Belt and Road Initiative. And it has already been announced that Angela Merkel and Prime Minister Modi did discuss Belt and Road Initiative as part of the discussions overnight at dinner. And you have clearly indicated that there is a difference of opinion between Germany and India on this. Germany sees this as an economic opportunity and India sees this as a strategic challenge. In your view, who will influence whom? Do you think Germany will be able to influence India or vice versa, given that Germany also will have a problem of strategic kind in economic terms once China becomes a superpower economic force in the world? And just if you don't mind, just one more question on Russia. There has been some talk that India is now trying to prevail upon Russia to do for India in the NSG membership bid what America did for India for the exemption. I'm sure you know what I'm driving at. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. In general, let me tell you something. I am a believer that all these concessions and subsidies to trade are hoaxes. I have dealt many years with Africa, and I always tell the African Union that the ACP Lomé agreements are the biggest hoax played on you. You end up growing what Europe wants to eat, and you import your own food. So I am not a great favorite of GSP. I believe that investment-linked free trade is the best bet for any country. And instead of chasing trade concessions, we should chase investment to come into our country, and that is what I have spent the better part of my career, particularly since '91, doing. Yes, we do study trade and embassies and say what are the opportunities, what are our neighbors or other competitors doing, and what we can do, what are the non-tariff barriers, and therefore let us put pressure. But the GSP Plus, what you refer to, the one that rewards Pakistan and a few other countries for doing good things which earlier they were doing bad through trade concessions, is an old module. It doesn't apply to us. I have seen that, for instance, African countries under the ACP would get duty-free access of flowers into Africa, into EU. So what happened was Indian companies moved into Africa and started growing flowers. It's not that growing flowers there was cheaper or different. It is simply that 12% difference of the duty made them far more competitive. So this African countries welcomed Indian investment. Indian guy was very happy in going ahead and selling it. So this happens a lot. And I am a believer of this. Similarly, when India gave the duty-free tariff preference scheme to all LDCs to enter the Indian market for about 94% of their HS codes. What happened was Indians started investing in Africa, the same way that the Europeans did, to grow dal. and sell it back to India because now there was no duty and they're very fertile lands. So there are several African countries which actually run trade surpluses with India on single commodities, be they cashew, be they sugar, be they dal. So what I'm trying to say, the investment-linked free trade is a much better alternative to GSP. So I wouldn't even see my government looking for such concessions. Yes, FTA, yes, because that is also linked to investment and what mistake we made with ASEAN was that we negotiated the trade and implemented, I think, in 2007, and then the investment went on till 2012, it wouldn't happen. India's biggest draw is investment in services, which is what we need. And the trade is the draw for our partners. So unless we always negotiate them together, it is an error of judgment, which India has made many times. So I think this is something we should learn. And with Europe also, this FTA should be clearly that the BTIA, the bilateral trade and investment agreements, which should become an EU TIA, must have all these elements, including free movement of people and labor, into this clearly built up. So I hope I answered the question that GSP, not my target. My target is get your interests organized and see how best you can get them. Other side has their interests, but as I did say that Europe is caught in small niches. And you mentioned Scotch whisky. The Scotch whisky, wine, small cars, these are the things that they keep asking us for access. So tell me, with so much investment in small cars in India, how can we open the market to small cars? It is not a rational approach. But certainly for wine, they say the duties are too high. We believe that the attitude to Indian pharmaceuticals is very negative. So so with Brexit, which will be the entry point to Europe?
The new gateways.
Yeah, I think the new gateway, whether for all economic activity, is largely going to be Germany, because Frankfurt is the hub of the stock markets, the financial business, and Germany is going to become a even bigger investor in our Make in India, and they are heavily involved with our solar and smart cities, railways, and many things. So they will be like Japan is in Asia, it will be Germany in Europe. But we are trying to tell the German company that you don't have the bandwidth like a Japanese trading house has. They don't have the bandwidth to do everything. So they should have, links with French and Belgium and Dutch and Spanish companies to build larger European consortia. But I can assure you in India, a German name attracts far more confidence than, let's say, a Dutch name. So those things have to be factored in. So I think Germany is definitely...
There would have to be some difference there. Sometimes there isn't.
Yes. And... yeah.
Let me give you the floor. Wait, okay, have you finished?
For his question,
okay.
yes.
All right, then you speak.
Yeah, sorry. Would you like to also comment on the other South Asian countries as well? Would they prefer GSP plus or FTA?
No, see, if I was Pakistan and I'm getting a GSP plus for frankly doing precious little, my due apologies, why would I give it up? And I have no quarrel with them. I can tell you, all through my time in Europe, I have never gone to any European country and said, why are you doing this for Pakistan? Never. It's no matter of little. My concern is do something more for me. So each country to its best. And whatever serves your purpose. Okay, supposing I had a GSP like this for India, I'm not going to go ahead and give it up. All I'm saying, it is not something that I would go out and negotiate for and say, oh, this is my objective. That I want to. But if I have it like Pakistan does or some other, I think it's very good for them. But I think in the long run, even for them, it is better to go to a FTA-based approach, which includes all factors, than stick on a subsidy, which can be withdrawn for many minor reasons. And then your large number of people will be out of jobs. So that is the risk you run at the back.
Yeah, you see, on GSP, as you know, that Bangladesh chaired the LDCs for many years. So this was a principal point of negotiation with European Union, and of course, and the major Western partners in the West. GSP, we have, of course, profited enormously, Bangladesh has, from a preferential market access, though theoretically we used to take the position, we sometimes still do that, preferences prolong pain, and therefore, we have to go to the marketplace to trade. But today, as you probably know, we are looking to about $50 billion worth of garment exchange by 2022, garment trade with European Union. So it has given Bangladesh tremendous leg up, GSP. So there are some, I don't want you all to go away thinking that this has no value whatsoever. It does have it.
It has value.
Depends on, how
depends
you
on the country.
use this. And these are very technical negotiations, of course, rules of origin and all that sort of thing. But these are things that we...
And
we
that has helped Bangladesh attract other foreign investment into textiles.
Absolutely.
So that's what the same thing I told you about Africa.
Africa.
Yeah, it works the same way.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yes,
I have to
Mr.
answer your
Suryanarayan.
question, sir. Thank you. OBOR, okay, 2 years ago, it was the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which attracted everybody that, the Chinese are coming, the Chinese want to do. So most people got the general view, let's get associated, rather than let them run off with it. I think OBOR is the next part of that. And again, the general view was, why let them run off with it? And let's get associated. But what is the nature of association? Nobody is very clear. India has a principled view that this is a sovereignty issue. So therefore, we are not going to get associated. I personally am not clear as to why this is such an important issue, except that people want to dip into the Chinese pot. The Chinese factories are not running, so they need to create demand elsewhere where your stuff can be provided.
Excess capacity.
Well, at the moment it's capacity, not even excess capacity, to get them running again and prevent long layoffs and to fund people. But this is not a new strategy. In about 25 years ago, the Chinese started with 5 billion in Africa, and then it became 10 billion. Today it's become 40 billion. The same with our friends in Pakistan, 5 billion, 10 billion, 46 billion. Central Asia. At one time, they went everywhere with 10 billion. ASEAN 10 billion fund, Central Asia 10 billion fund. And those days, I used to run Africa policy. I have to ask everybody. They say, if you know how to reach this money, tell us. Nobody knew how to reach that money. It was entirely meant for Chinese companies to do Chinese stuff in your countries. So that is the same thing they are trying to do now. So what is the biggest advantage? It can create infrastructure and support connectivity in many parts, ASEAN, in Africa, in Central Asia, Europe. But the question is, does it? The question is again of implementation. In India, we cry hoarse that our implementation is not great. But I have compared Chinese implementation. I find that is not great. In Africa, Chinese implementation is not great. Tanzania railway does not work anymore. They were supposed to build this railway into Laos, which is right next to them. 10 years down the line, the railway doesn't start. So it is not as if you dipping into this pot is something which leads. So it's a big political issue. And sometimes it generates domestic problems. I think Pakistan has a small taste of them. One which works is the Kunming link from Dawei. That works, all right? I think, or it will work. But I think it's an even jury out. So to me, politically, India has an issue. I think many countries should have an issue. There is certainly a level of strategic penetration. The Chinese are trying to play it neutral because they really want their economy to work. I don't think you can go through other people's territories without concurrence. And I don't think your record of implementation is great. To me, those would be the operative issues. But where Germany thinks is that its companies, who also see Germany is a great exporting nation. It thrives on exports. So it looks at OBOR as somewhere where its companies can get great contracts. So that is where the German interest lies, which is different from ours. So it is not a quarrel, but it's just different approaches. And certainly I'm sure Prime Minister Modi has explained to Chancellor Merkel why we see it as a strategic problem. And while it has certain concomitant benefits for certain countries like Myanmar gave up on it. And certain countries have not, and Laos, Cambodia live with it. I think Indonesia is struggling with that great train which the Japanese were not given and the Chinese were given. I haven't seen much happen on it. I've been following that. So these are questions. Overall, great idea. I'm not sure greatly conceived. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Russia, yes.
Russia and its
Okay, I think on NSG, broadly, our approach is that we are reaching out to everybody to get into that. Professor did mention that it was a contradiction, but in diplomacy, there is no contradiction. It is all continuum of a policy which goes this way. So today, our policy is to get into NSG to facilitate nuclear trade, so that we keep getting our supplies, and it generates more investment. That is the real reason. And it's not to make more bombs. That is not the reason. So in NSG, there are 2 or 3 small countries who have a vote. And they, despite everybody telling them to fall in line, whether in the European position or American position, they don't. They take their own view. But that is what somebody asked me, do Europe have a common policy? Well, they have a common policy, but on this they stick to their own view. But the Chinese are the biggest hurdle. And so what you are saying is we telling Russia, well, we could only tell Russia, can you please lean on the Chinese? But I don't think today the Russians are in any position to deal on the Chinese. Thanks to Western sanctions on Russia post-Ukraine. This is what we try to explain to them. It has a very negative connotation for Asia because Russia has totally gone behind the Chinese and left the front to them, which for us, a separate China, Russia for Asia was much better than having one block. This is thanks to the Western sanction, but as I said, each country does its own.
Okay, Dr. Bara. You can mic.
Thank you, Ambassador, for an excellent lecture. Myself, Rupak Bora from ISAS. Like you, I also have a Japanese and a JNU connection. So, hajime mashite yoroshiku onegaishimasu. Yeah. So, but my question is on the Prime Minister's current trip to these 4 countries, Germany, Spain, Russia, and France. Do you see that the Prime Minister might be hard-pressed on some issues, especially as, like, I was watching the news today, the French president was having a meeting with President Putin, and there were issues regarding Russian involvement in the recently held French presidential elections. So do you think that India, and even with Russia being out of the recent, of the formerly G8 and now it's G7, do you think that the Prime Minister has to do a very delicate balancing act between Russia and the Indian interest in Germany, Spain and France? And the second thing is with regards to Germany's take on the G4. So where have we proceeded? I know that it's India, Japan, Germany and Brazil. So how far is the movement on the G4 issue? And is it a big domestic issue in Germany as well?
Oh, in Germany, G4 is not an issue. As I mentioned, even with German discussions in Europe, I frankly don't think it's an issue. But Germany sees G4 as a way to get its place in the sun. And therefore they believe if something happens and there was an election, they think they can win it to become a permanent member. So they want to contribute to the creation of a new system, much like India. So therefore our approach is the same. But it doesn't mean that we think the same way on security everywhere. And certainly on the, as I said, the Germans are quite paranoid about the Russians. The Russians were already supposed to have hacked their parliament last year. Now they're apprehensive they'll hack other things, and hacking and fake news. But fake news only means people are gullible and they believe anything, no? Yeah. So those, but I think if it will come up in the discussion between India and Germany, our response will be that we are ready to cooperate more with you on cyber crime issues. I think that is where we really want to work on. Same. We have a good cyber security dialogue with both Germany and France. And I think the idea is to take that dialogue into action and have it more. This is what we really need to do. We have a common security agreement with Germany. But again, those elements, we need to do something about them. So that is where we are trying to be persuasive. So I don't think India is going to talk to the Russians about, are you hacking the Germans? That I don't think would happen. But certainly, we would like to work closely with. And if the Russians are really as good as everybody says they are, I think we should be talking to them about cyber security. That is the best way out. I hope I answered both your questions. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. On G4, by the way, I mean, it's not so much the coordination, I think, between the G4 countries themselves. I mean, there is no dearth of it, and, you know, it's a very sophisticated kind of intramural negotiations among themselves. It's with the neighbors of the individual G4. I mean, the biggest problem of Germany is none else than, say, Italy or Brazil, Spain, Argentina, for Japan, China, for India, Pakistan, and so you see, so it's that. So that is where the sort of the Gordian knot lies. I mean, in the place of each in the neighborhood rather than among themselves. Okay. We still have some more time, sir. It's
Kishore Chandaria.
the old African context, of course. Yeah.
Tanastali. Indamanalu and Tuturuale Anjirano Iklaru.
If everybody
Anjara?
understands
I don't
it
know
to
that much Swahili.
Yeah. No, I thought you wrote a book on Anjira.
Yeah, that's in Ethiopia, yes.
So I'm
Ours
just
is
You're
asking
speaking
you.
Amharic.
Uhuru Nakazi.
Aber ich spreche Deutsch. Just want to tell you, I just came back from Europe and particularly from Moscow 2 days ago. And Europe's current engagement with India is what to say, syllabus, what we are getting it from here. But when I went there, I saw the communist countries have changed their ideology, and also they are trying to see how they can build Europe together with other countries. India has one difficulty, is this thing, that everything is there. Everything is there in India. There is nothing we cannot do in India, but only mentality of Indianness, what I'm trying to say, Indianness, is that we have the old mentality which we cannot throw it out. If we change it, India will be number one economical power in the world. And also, Europe engagement, you were talking about Germany and other things. I have been in Germany when the war ended. And at that time, what they were talking was different. Today, what they are talking is different. And yesterday, you saw that Angelina said, we don't need USA to guide us. Now, that is the strength which European countries have built. And today, only what I see is also that they want to exit out of European Union, so many countries, because divisive political forces and the divisive, for example, Holland want to have 2 parts of the world, Belgium want to have 3, and Spain want to 2. Now that, if happens, how Europe is going to help India in future?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think you're very right, sir. Very right. Beginning with my own country, which I think your family knows so well. You know, you asked me about the biggest challenge when I was a young man was how to explain to the Japanese that India was serious about attracting investment. But by the time I ended my career, it was much easier. So, in a generation, much has changed in India. It's also difficult for a European to comprehend India because we are multiple Indias. Each state is different. And if we talk about large number of millionaires, we also have the world's largest number of poor people. So it's difficult to, engage. So for instance, in India, corporate social responsibility is a legally bound thing for every company to do. Whereas in Germany, it's not so. So when I wrote for this book, I put CSR as one theme where India and Germany should do more. And it was very difficult for German companies to give me real ideas of what they were doing under CSR. It was basically some kind of philanthropy and training which they were putting under the CSR head. It is not real CSR. So there were many things that India and Germany could do out of this, and that is how this book was born. Precisely because of what you said, that it is difficult for firstly us ourselves to understand which part of my country I should project. I would of course like to project the best, but the questions you get are about the worst. And how do you not make them look bad, and how you reach understanding on them. The second part was, I mean, it's very simple. When I told you about the Christian thing, so it was very difficult for me to talk to this group of 80 MPs in Parliament in Germany who come under the St. Stephen Circle, which is basically a Christian group who only interested to protect Christians overseas. So I asked them, I said, don't you see the contradiction in your own country? That there were contradictions. I said, in Europe, today you say you cannot wear a burqa and go to the beach. They say, yes, it's against European ethos. I said, but if a nun went to the beach, will she have to take off her habit? Didn't think about it. So this is the thing. That's the same thing about my country. At least give me that doubt, the benefit of doubt that I am doing something right. Try and understand how I am doing it and why I am doing it in a particular context. Similarly, sir, when it comes to science, the science in Europe and Germany is very well organized, hierarchical and laterally both. In India, it is still very ad hoc. So one of the things, again, my book talks about is, can we bring these two attitudes together? We'll get much better research. And this is not technology, this is pure science. How do we use a light beam to do benefit for humankind? These are the approaches which we went back to the idea of democracy. That democracy means common values. So what can I do between my people to get betterment of humanity out? It is not an ideology. And I think this is where we will ultimately get resonance. Because at the end of the day, I think Indian science is one of the things which does well. We even put German satellites, Indonesian satellites into space. So I think there's a certain amount of respect for us. So I find that wherever you can earn the respect, you try and take that issue a little bit forward. But there's no gainsaying the fact that the Europeans have changed much. And even the former Eastern Europe has really gone a long way. And India continues to engage with them. I think our Vice President was in Poland very recently. And we keep up our engagement with those countries as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent discussion, excellent remarks. I will very soon hand over the floor to Director Subrata Mitra for his vote of thanks. But before that, just to conclude, I want to mention a historical anecdote, as if it were, in the first contact between India and Europe. I'm doing, as Professor Mitra knows, doing a paper on Trump's visit to the Mediterranean areas. And in order to sort of do some research on it, hit upon Plutarch. And Plutarch, in his Lives, Alexander makes the mention of the first formal contact between India and Alexander, and how India, and to a certain extent Persia, changed Alexander. He says that when he was coming towards the Oxus, and he had a lot of complaints from his mother, Olympia, who was left behind in Greece, about the generals of Alexander. And Alexander said that, remarked that my mother is asking too high a rent for the 9 months I spent in her, you see. But as he was returning, having been chastened morally, intellectually by India, Persia, etc., to the complaints of the generals about his mother, he said to Ptolemy that, Ptolemy, my generals don't realize that a single drop of my mother's tear washes away 1,000 such letters. So that is how the contact with India changed Alexander, according to Plutarch. Anyway, with these words, I will now give the floor to Professor Mitra for his final
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Shri Gurjit Singh, Chairperson, Ambassador Dr. Chowdhury, Your Excellencies, Shri Chandaria, distinguished audience, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to make 3 very brief points by the way of a vote of thanks. But before I do, a little anecdote, since Poland was mentioned. I was once in a conversation with the Indian ambassador to Poland. He had just finished his career like you. So I said, Your Excellency, you have had a grand career. So what was it like? He says, well, it was a very good career, only I had to be trained 3 times in my life. I said, how is that? He said, well, when I started out as a young IFS man, I was trained to go abroad and look for foreign aid to India. And then came the liberalization of the economy, and I had to go abroad and look for opportunities for joint investment. Towards the end of my career, I was trained to go abroad and see what we can buy up and invest abroad. Yes. That was one way. I have learned a lot from you. I have 3 points to make to thank you. First and foremost, I thank you on behalf of ISAS, which is both a think tank for the ministries of foreign affairs and trade and industry, but also a research institute of the NUS, a highly ranked research university. We are thinkers, and in a think tank you can't think if you don't know the world, and one way to know the world is to go and do field work, and we don't have either the time or the money to do field work. An opportunity like this gives my colleagues a great window to the world out there. Now, we are only researchers. We never get to sit at the high tables of diplomacy. You do. Today, the candor with which you have talked, the seriousness with which you have taken our research community, they move me. I'm very, very grateful to you for giving us this opportunity and to the audience, because ISAS in return gives nothing. Yeah, you will get a couple of books. You get a platform. But people like you in the middle of a working day take your time to make common cause, and this is for the cause of knowledge. So the gift you have brought us is the gift of knowledge. I thank you for it. My second vote of thanks is to you as a fellow political scientist, because political science, unlike all other sciences, is the most fragile of sciences. Because what we have to deal with is opinion and perception. And as you know, this is an old problem of Indian epistemology. Comes from Shankara. What do you see in front of you? It has the shape of a snake or of a rope, and you can't touch it to see what it is like. So what is reality like? When you tell me that for a diplomat there is no contradiction, that Ober can be both a threat and an opportunity, I think you have said it all. Because you pulled together neorealism and neoconstructivism. And that's the best we can get. I now speak for my young colleagues who are raring to go to a PhD. This is a lesson to take from here. And when you said, what does a diplomat do? Well, you don't have to worry too much about the wood. Look at the trees, engage the fellow, and get him back to his burqa with the habit. I mean, this is, I think, one of the best bits of advice one can give a political scientist who wants to go toward diplomacy. But my third vote of thanks is to you as a senior student from the JNU, because there are many of us are here from the Jawaharlal Nehru University. I belong to the batch of 72, sir. Mm-hmm. The university was set up in the name of Jawaharlal Nehru to understand India at her best, represent India at her best, and defend India at her best. You have done all three. You would have made Nehru proud. And to me, you come across as a long line of ambassadors. I have served in Germany. Ambassador Lamba, Ambassador Sen, and Ambassador Rangachari. When you went to Heidelberg, you might have seen a beautiful statue of Tagore. Yes. That was a gift of Rangachariji. And when I was the director of the institute and this statue comes, and I'm told, this is a German institute, we can't have a statue which is not a statue of a German leader or a German civil person. So how do I defend a an Indian statue in the German public sphere. So I have to say, this is not an Indian statue. This is a statue of peace. This is a statue of a person who wrote the national anthem of 2 South Asian countries, and they gave the music to the third one. And the statue of a person who stood up against Mahatma Gandhi, because Gandhi was getting a bit too nationalistic, and who said, "My Lord, lead me to a land where the mind is without fear and the head is held high," a bit like an ISAS. And today, when you say, Germany and India, Vorsprung durch Technik, I think Germany and India could not have found a better person to work for both countries. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. I'll bring this meeting to a close, the seminar to a close, but not before I leave you with the 2 books that Professor spoke about, and in return for yours, and in return also for the excellent remarks that you have made, and you do the profession proud.
Thank you.
Let me tell you this.
Most kind.
Okay, I wish you all the blessings of the holy month of Ramzan. But those of you who may not be fasting, and I suspect there may be some, there is tea outside. Is there? Yeah, there will be tea outside. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Time management, it's exactly
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you so much.